Welcome. I'm here with Representative Rob Wittman of Virginia. We're here in Quantico at the Modern Day Marine Expo. And Representative Wittman, thank you so much for being here.
Gosh, it's great to be here today. What an exciting day.
Definitely. It's very overcast and rainy. And speaking of that, I wanted to ask you how hurricane relief is going. You've played a big hand in talking about this and working with all the bases and civilians in Virginia.
We have. It's critical that the bases are there not only to support the men and women on the base, but their families and then the surrounding communities. So they've done a great job in looking at that. I want to give credit to the military, both in what they're doing to assist communities, our reserve units that are assisting communities, our National Guard, but also what they did to prepare for the storm, so to make sure they're supporting families. And what they did is to take pressure off the bases to allow the military members and their families to evacuate, to make sure the bases were available for supplies and for support. So they really thought this out well. Now things are starting to get back to normal on the bases, so our military members are coming back, but they've done a great job in making sure that they're the conduits to help communities.
And how did your district turn out? Did everything end up okay? Or?
Well, for our district, we turned out okay. We
Yeah.
were more in a support role. Everybody planned as if the hurricane was going to hit and that we'd have to deal with floodwaters and tidal flooding, those sorts of things. It never quite panned out. Luckily, we had some elevated tides, but not flooding in the sense that the folks down in southeastern North Carolina had. So our areas were really here for support. Most of our ships at Norfolk went to sea, so we had 13 of those ships went to sea. All 14 ships that were in the shipyards, though, stayed, but they were there at sea, stayed at sea for 4 or 5 days, then came back in a sequential pattern, so it didn't overwhelm the Navy base there. But they did a great job of preparing for that, being at sea and then coming back in, just in case the hurricane did hit there in the Hampton Roads area.
Great. Well, the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, you just passed it, I know.
Yes.
But, the cycle never ends. So I was just wondering what's on your mind for the next 2020 NDAA. What are some of the topics that you really need to address? You're on the Readiness subcommittee, I know, so that's something big in your area.
Absolutely. We're both in Readiness and Sea Power. We want to make sure we continue to fund the training elements. Restoring lost readiness starts with training, starts with maintaining and repairing equipment, but it also continues to modernize our force. So one of the things we have to do is to make sure that we are modernizing our fleet of ships for the Navy, our aircraft, both for the Army and for the Air Force, and making sure we properly resource those elements, as well as what we're doing in the cyber realm. You know, folks ask all the time, said, Rob, what keeps you up at night? And for me, it's all the threats that occur out there in the cyber realm. So this NDAA, as well as future ones, we're really emphasizing what happens in that realm. Not only what do we do to secure our systems, but what do we do too to create a deterrent for our adversaries who may think about attacking our critical systems here? How do we make sure they understand that if they do that there's going to be a response that will be greater than what they do to us? And we have to make sure that we have the capability to do that and then have the policy right. So that's going to be an important part of that, as well as continuing to reform the acquisition process. You know, here today at Modern Day Marine, it really is all about how do we get technology as quickly as we can to the Marine and elsewhere, to the soldier, to the airman, and to the sailor. It really is about that. Today is a great opportunity, and you heard Lieutenant General Dave Berger say that through McCitic, the effort is to make sure that the Marines come here, they see what's available, kind of reversing the tables. Don't say, hey, let's write a requirement and then see what's out there. Why don't we first see what's out there? Let the Marines try it on. Let these young Marines take their ingenuity and their creativity and say, hey, we could take this and use it in a certain way, and then shorten the process to where we take that technology and get it into the hands of our Marines. So I think that's where we're going to be going, looking at simplifying the system, making it easier, getting technology more quickly to the warfighter so we can keep up with our adversaries.
Now, speaking of cyber, supply chain was a big one that you talked about in the
Yes.
NDAA. Do you feel that the NDAA has gone far enough in working with companies like ZTE and Highway compared to maybe what could have happened? And I know that some of the bases have already banned some of those products
Yes.
from on the base. So do you think more needs to be done into that, and maybe we'll see some hearings in the future?
It does. I think we have to do more. You know, we wanted to go straight to a ban of ZTE and other products where we were having challenges with the security of those products. I think we have to go back to that. One of the things has to be addressed. I was able to get it into the previous NDAAs, and that is making sure that we have U.S. sourced suppliers for basic elements of our systems. So that is printed circuit boards, the circuit boards that have all those semiconductors on there. The production of semiconductors, just down the road here, Micron is going to double the capacity of their foundry. They make the semiconductors here. What we want to do is to make sure not only are the constructed systems like the ZTE phones and others secure, but even as importantly, if you're going to produce those things in the United States, let's look at the sources of the parts, the printed circuit boards, the semiconductors. Let's make sure we have security there. So our hearings are going to be how do we create that level of assurance that there's not going to be a vulnerability, all the way down to the integral levels of those systems. So the printed circuit boards, the semiconductors are all an important part of that, as well as the systems after they're constructed.
Right. Now, changing gears a little bit,
Sure.
355 ship Navy, something that you've been a large proponent of. How do you feel that the workforce in Virginia has been able to come in to NAVSEA and other commands? And do you feel like they need more funding in order to recruit and retain the talent that they really need?
Well, I'm very enthused by the number of folks that are coming into that realm, both NAVSEA, within Navy, all the different elements, not just the shipbuilding side, but remember the maintenance side has to be pushed up. So
Yeah.
MARMAC, NAVSEA, all those elements, I think, are getting the people in. We need to have the right number of people with the right skill set. That skill set only develops if those people can continue there. And one of the things we need to look at also in the larger perspective is making sure that those individual salaries are commensurate with what salaries are on the private side.
Yeah.
So that means things like, having a cost of living raise now for federal employees becomes important. And I understand people look at the government and go, well, we need to really hold the purse tight, and I agree with that. But if we're going to retain the best and brightest, we need to at least have their salaries keep up. Federal employees haven't had a salary increase for a while. We did get to our men and women in uniform this year, the second year in a row of salary increases. So we need to look at the entire force structure there, civilian and uniform side, to make sure we are retaining the best and brightest, because we need them in this high level of technology needed in building ships and designing ships and designing and implementing the systems of the future. So, we need to look at the whole situation in order to make sure we're doing the right thing. So I feel good about the individuals that are coming in. So the recruitment's going well. The key for us now is retention. Make sure we retain those folks.
And are there other options on the table, maybe something like bonuses or something else that you can do, give them extra vacation time or something like that?
Well, there's always the ability within the federal workforce, if there's a shortage of people with particular skill sets, to be able to adjust the salaries in order to attract those people into the federal workforce. So the managers have that ability right now to make those changes. And they can, within the agency, they can approve certain elements of what they do to attract individuals. So whether it's a bonus, I'm not sure they have as much flexibility on the time off because that's somewhat structured.
Right.
But I do know that those managers have some tools in the toolbox to make sure that they attract folks and then retain them, especially if they have a critical skill set that may be wanting to leave an agency and go outside. They do have the ability to compete to keep them, which is what we need.
Now, you mentioned holding the purse strings tight when it comes to fiscal conservatism and all those types of things. The defense budget has had some pretty big leaps and bounds over the past 2 years, which has
Yes.
been helpful for rebuilding readiness. That may be flattening off in the next couple of years. I mean, it's getting pretty high at this
Yes.
point, right? How do you reconcile that with the 355 Navy, with trying to retain all these people? How
Sure.
can you fit everything in that one top line?
Well, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, the increases we've seen in the last 2 years have been to rebuild lost readiness, and that's due to the sequester. So we're kind of making up ground that we lost with the sequester. A couple of things we have to do is we have to make sure that we are doing the most with the dollars that we have. So putting additional dollars there are great. One of the things I look at is strategically for the United States to be able to be successful against our adversaries, we not only have to have the technology for our men and women in the fighting force to prevail, but we also have to make sure that we do more per our unit of currency than they do per their unit of currency. And it means the dollars then that are appropriated, we have to find creative and imaginative ways to use those to provide the greatest capability possible. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges for us, is how do we design an acquisition system that is quick, that allows you to take off-the-shelf technology and other things and get them to the warfighter more quickly and do it more efficiently than our adversaries, because that's how we prevail. In the past, we've been able to just out-resource our adversaries. We're not going to be in that realm going in the future because of the deficit and the debt. So that means we have to work smarter. We have to be able to do more with the dollars that we have. And I am very confident that we can do that. That's going to be what we lay out, I think, in the years to come, is how we accomplish that. And, you know, here today at Modern Day Marine, all the great things that are going on out there on the private side. So taking those ideas, you know, fast-tracking them, looking at ideas that work or don't work. Don't be afraid to fail. If you're going to fail, fail quickly. But let's look at a lot of things and come up with the best solution that's the most efficient use of our resources. When we do that, and we will, then we prevail.
We mentioned earlier that you're on the Readiness Subcommittee. What is the state of readiness now, especially after they've had the supplemental budget 2017,
Sure.
the bump in 2018?
Well, it's still being rebuilt. You know, I work with Chairman Wilson as well as others there to make sure that we are focusing on getting the dollars to the most fundamental aspects of our defense budget, and that is training. We want to make sure that that occurs both at the tactical level and at the strategic level. So joint training opportunities where they can train at the brigade level, they can train with other navies around the world, with other land forces around the world to understand what's going to happen if we operate in a joint environment. So things like the RIMPAC exercise, so things like the National Training Center for our Army brigades to be able to operate and train at that level are key. So that's really where the focus has been, in getting resources immediately to those areas, getting that training experience up so that all of our brigades have it, not just a few, not just those that are ready to forward deploy, making sure too that that folks across the spectrum in the Navy, from the aircraft to the submarines to the aircraft carriers to the surface ships, all have that experience. So when faced with having to operate in that joint environment, they're ready to go.
Great. Representative Rob Wittman, thank you so much.
Thanks again. Thanks so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you.